All right, testing. Sorry, I had a lot of coffee today, and then I was trying to keep the tears and the snot coming down from that beautiful story about Harper's Playground. And then Sadie gave me chills because I too am in the fitness space, and I can't tell you how much I agree with her about how much of a problem it is that the fitness space tells you that you're not enough. That's what they sell to you, right? So I'm glad to have a comrade who disagrees with that. My name's Lynn Lee. I'm the founder of Society 9. We're the brand for the fight within every woman, and we make women's boxing gear and apparel. And my personal fight actually starts with a story about egg rolls. So when I was in elementary school, bake sales, of course, as you all know, is a thing. And my family in particular didn't want to necessarily do what everybody else is doing, which is like the stale box brownies, right? We wanted to be different. And I especially was like all for that because I liked being different. I was both made fun of as well as celebrated by the small group of Asian kids at the elementary school. We thrived on being the different kids. So I remember when the bake sale sign-up list came up, put my name down, you're supposed to put down what you're bringing, and I put egg rolls. And of course, this welcomed both like confusion as well as awe by all the other like little 6-year-old kids, right? Like, this is a bake sale. Why are you bringing egg rolls? This isn't a Chinese restaurant. I'm Vietnamese, by the way, but of course, this child, we all look the same. I was committed to doing this, and especially to showing the bullies wrong, because I'm like, I thrived on being different. And so I told my mom, I was like, we're gonna sell out first, because we have to show those kids. So my mom and I made 200 egg rolls the day before. And I was a little nervous because I had already kind of like committed to the whole I'll show you kind of mindset, but I was competitive from the start as a kid. Competed and fought against my sister all the time, and wanted to be the better child, and so I was always feeding off of that energy anyway. So it totally made sense for my personality type. The day of the bake sale comes, and like clock starts, and I'm just wheeling and dealing egg rolls, 2 for $1, walking up down the street, giving samples to all the attendees to the bake sale, flashing them a smile, telling them about my family's culture, the origins of the egg roll, what makes this a special recipe, market differentiation. So I understood the importance of that early on because, on my block of tables, there was the same chocolate chip cookies, the same box brownies. In fact, there was probably 2/3 box brownies on that table, but I had the smell and the original taste. So I sold out first. Go figure. Thank you. I not only sold out first, but I knew that it paid, pun very well intended, to be different. So as I finished, I got a rest break, right? So I'm walking by the other tables, counting my money in front of the kids who bullied me. So I knew since that age, since I was 7, that competitive nature was just built in me. And that suited me really well as I got older because it was that willingness to put myself, Lynn, like get your act together, that willingness to just say, you know what, for all the bullies or for my own personal doubt or other people who doubted me, like always rise above that and find your own wins. So fast forward to college, I had a terrible breakup, put me down just like a lot of bad breakups do. And of course I thought about wallowing my tears in Netflix and ice cream. But there was a point where I said to myself, I was like, okay, that sounds okay, but then I didn't want to add to like my freshman 15. So I was like, okay, you can either do that or like, why don't you do something crazy so that like when you look back at this time, you're like, I got my butt dumped, but I rose above and I accomplished something that was completely nuts. So I decided to train for a marathon. I had never run a marathon before. I hadn't run a half, hadn't run a 5K. I had like casually jogged maybe in the neighborhood. And so to do 26.2 miles was a little bit of a bold move. And I was gonna study abroad soon. So I was like, what if I ran a marathon somewhere in Europe? So I decided to run the Amsterdam Marathon. And so I started that whole training process feeling like I was gonna die every single time. And then once I finally did it, in Amsterdam no less, we finished at the Olympic Stadium there, which was awesome. People are like screaming and yelling. They announce your name, and I just felt like $1 million. I sort of felt like an Olympian, but not really, because I like finished at 5 hours and thought I was gonna die. But once I finished, like I look at the pictures now, even on my Facebook, like I flip back sometimes. I'm just like, man, like how crazy is that I could have been like every other sad, depressed young adult teenager, like I just got dumped. But instead, like I freaking finished the Amsterdam Marathon. And so that resiliency to pick yourself up in something that was really, really could have put me down, you know, it continued to carry through. So what you'll see in my other anecdotes is that this kind of mentality, that resiliency, is oftentimes the only thing that you'll have. So fast forward, I come back from studying abroad. I got bored of running, because after you run a marathon, you're like, why would I want to do that again? So I was like, I can keep running, which sounds awful now that I've like felt it, or I could do something different. And I went to Israel, and crazy story, but to keep it short, I met the former commander of division in the IDF, which is the Israeli Defense Forces. He's a big, like, stocky guy. I mean, when you hear commander of the IDF, you just picture this, like, big buff dude. That's what he was. And he said to me, he's like, you know, a woman of your sassy character would serve really well learning Krav Maga. And I was like, what is Krav Maga? Does anybody in here, has any of you heard of Krav Maga? Okay, one person, fantastic. 2, 3, 4, 5, fantastic. Okay, so Krav Maga is an Israeli martial art. It was based in Israel, created for the Israeli Defense Forces and Mossad. And I had no clue what it was at the time, though. I was like, Krav Maga, what? I didn't speak Hebrew, clearly. And so I came back to the United States after traveling there, and I Googled Krav Maga Portland, and I was like, that's interesting. So I show up, try my first class, and it completely changed my life. And I'm giving the very abridged version, but you know, when I first started, I grew up in a culture, again, I said I'm Vietnamese, I grew up in a culture that's very patriarchal. Patriarchal in the sense of, you know, my dad used to tell me, like, find a good partner or husband and, like, let him take care of you, let him protect you. And it's all obviously very well-intentioned. It's also very rooted in our culture, but it was like, come on, man, really? Like, you raised your daughter to be strong and empowered, but you're telling me conflicting things. And of course, that's always affected my personal identity. And so to do Krav Maga, which I completely fell in love with and was obsessed with, because imagine your spectrum of human emotion, right? You've got love, happiness, you've got anger, sadness, like the full spectrum. Now imagine as a woman, at least in my particular sense, but I think culturally, it actually doesn't matter. I think it's a very common thing women feel. Imagine that you've been encouraged or influenced to suppress certain feelings: aggression, violence, anger, bitchiness, right? We've been asked to suppress these feelings for so long for the sake of courtesy, politeness, etc. So when you ask me to start punching things, I'm like, oh yeah, like that's literally what it felt inside, like, oh, okay, I could get into this, all right. So I started training kind of obsessively, but I was training basically 6 days a week, and fast forward, again, abridged version here, but fast forward, I get my brown belt, which is the advanced belt that you can get in the Krav Maga system before you start training for your black belt, which is a several years type of process. But I made it up to my brown belt within 3 years, and I was teaching kickboxing as well at the time. Thank you, I heard a whoop in there. That test busted my butt, but that's a whole other story. But it was in that whole experience that I literally got a spiritual awakening. That's what I like to describe it as. And that, for me, was probably the biggest leap of faith I've ever taken in my life. And it came so simply, you know, like I loved fitness, or I grew to love it because I trained for a marathon. But that spiritual awakening was because, like I said, if you were to suppress an entire emotion, an entire feeling for however long, I can't tell you how many women I meet all the time when I go to like new gym communities or whatever. I can't tell you how many of these women tell me a similar story. You know, like I didn't know what it felt like to feel this way, varied feeling, but what it felt like to feel strong, to feel empowered, until like I just punched a bag. It was like the spiritual release. And so for me, whenever I saw my class full of women in my kickboxing class, it gave me such pleasure because I knew we shared a common bond. We were all in different parts of our journey, personally and professionally, but we shared the same thread, the same passion for the sport and what it had done to uplift ourselves and empower us. So of course, I'm very naturally entrepreneurial, as you learned from my egg roll days. And I started hearing more and more frequently about the female students. They would come up to me all the time and say, hey, like, I'm wearing these gloves and they don't really fit me well and they hurt me sometimes. Like, do you have any recommendations for a better, like, women's glove? And of course, the stuff they kept on showing me was the ugly pink stuff, like the bubble gum, pink boxing gloves that you see all the time. If you Google women's boxing gloves, that is literally what you will see. If you have your phones out, literally Google women's boxing gloves. You'll see us as the first search result now. But at the time, hey, full circle. But at the time, that's literally all you see was this like sea of Pepto-Bismol pink, bubblegum pink. And so the more and more I heard this stuff, I was like, that's strange, because I was wearing men's stuff. My hand is the size of a third grader, so I was like, okay, there's something to be had here, because here I am as an advanced student and an instructor, and I'm wearing men's stuff too. So I was working with Nike at the time, doing retail environments, and I started tinkering around on this idea, nights and weekends. I decided, okay, I'm gonna give myself 2 years. Give myself 2 years, subsidize my messing around with this idea, using my salary, pay my student loans, pay my rent, survive, but then everything else would be put towards this idea. And it took about 1.5 years before I had my first sign of life. And I said that to myself. I was like, Lynn, if you don't have a sign of life within 2 years, scrap it. I didn't want to be a entrepreneur who kept having a side hustle, whatever. I was like, I was gonna go committed because, as you've learned, like, I go all in. So, August 2014 was when I had my sign of life. I had my first prototype. It was our first boxing glove, which would be what we ended up launching with on Kickstarter. And then I also was one of the winners of the 2014 PDX Startup Challenge, which was hosted by the Portland Development Commission, now known as Prosper Portland. And I had saved up about 6 months worth of like personal runway to survive. And I sold everything that I owned when I had that sign of life happen. My apartment at a certain point was completely empty. I had my mattress on the ground. I didn't even have a box spring, okay? No frame, nothing. My office was a plastic storage bin with my monitor on it and a cardboard box with my laptop on it. And that was it for a while. And I knew, since that was August, I knew I had until January, which was fitness season, to come out. So only a couple of months of sort of getting my life together after quitting and saying, okay, let's go. So everything from prepping for the campaign and everything was a blitz because, you know, when you're super broke, survival makes you act real fast. And I had no backup plan. The backup plan was me. You know, I wish I had like a trust fund or an estate that was waiting for me to claim, but that was never gonna happen. And so I knew that my own wherewithal was the only thing that was going to help me survive. And so I launched the Kickstarter, January 2015. We raised a little under $60,000. We were able to successfully fulfill our campaign. And since then, it was a complete blitz of exciting opportunities, as well as the ups and downs that the other entrepreneurs have talked about, which is the highs can feel extremely high and the lows feel awful. But I think what I had learned, though, in this whole process of training in Krav Maga and training for the marathon is that leaps of faith is like a sport. It's an endurance race. Every single leap is literally you jumping, and you have to ask yourself, how high are you willing to jump? And you have to take care of yourself in that process. For every leap that you take, drink your water, make sure you eat well, go for a walk, take a breath. As Sadie so eloquently mentioned, like, be mindful. And that was a really hard thing for me to learn. But what's nice is that the training reminded me of that. And every single time I have a moment of self-doubt of why am I doing this, I get emails like the one from Cheryl in California who said that the thing that she loves most in her day is that 1 hour that she gets to claim from herself, from her stressful job, from being a mom, needing to take care of the kids, making sure her husband's also taken care of, that 1 hour of the day that she gets to put on our boxing gloves and feel like a gladiator. It's women like Cheryl and however many thousands of women who are wearing our stuff now around the world, from United Arab Emirates, all the way to Singapore, to the UK, to frickin' Iowa. We all share this common thread, which is we're here to find the fight within ourselves. And so for me, like, I never started Society United to just be a boxing company. I started this company so that we could encourage all women to find the fight within themselves. So for Cheryl, if I can be along with her for that journey, for that 1 hour that day, that's what all these leaps of faith are for. So thank you.